Another burst of exceptionally warm European weather, this time in Portugal, has triggered 3 major wildfires. The biggest is in the southwest of the country. Portugal experienced its hottest day of the year yesterday, 46 degrees Celsius, 115 Fahrenheit. Thankfully, the fire is 50 miles from the resorts of the Algarve. Firefighters are desperately fighting to make sure it stays that way.
Flames on the fringes of one of Portugal's most popular tourist regions. High temperatures and strong winds have propelled wildfires into the Algarve. Only the work of more than 900 firefighters in blistering conditions has stopped them spreading further. In the daylight, little has been left unscathed.
Durante a noite, os trabalhos que foram executados.
Work carried out by firefighters and the civil defence overnight has stabilised the perimeter of the fire, but there are 2 critical points on both sides that require a lot of attention.
More than 1,400 people have been evacuated so far. The fires have crossed into the northern part of the Algarve, around 50 miles from the southern coastal resorts.
If it goes to south, there's a huge forest, let's say a huge forest park that can be affected, and that's something that they are trying to avoid. But obviously, there is a risk.
5 million Brits visit Portugal each year. This, their favourite region. Now, the peak time. The major tourist sites are currently safe, but with extreme heat alerts in place, putting these wildfires out is even more of a challenge. Sam Holder, News at 10.
In the millions of years before man-made climate change, Antarctic ice has acted as a kind of fridge. Its icy whiteness helps deflect the sun's rays and keep the Earth cool. But scientists say that thanks to global warming from burning fossil fuels, more of the ice is melting and turning into darker oceans or land, which, you guessed it, absorb and distribute more heat. From fridge to radiator, you might say. Martin is here to talk us through the science.
It's quite tricky, Tom, because historically there's not a huge amount of data, simply because Antarctica is so wild and so inhospitable. But what scientists do say is the events they're seeing now would have been unthinkable even 30 years ago. Now, a heat wave in March last year caused by a river of warm air working its way in from Australia saw temperatures 38.5 degrees above average. Put that in context, that's the equivalent of it being 46 degrees on Christmas Day in the UK. Now, fortunately, it was winter, so temperatures didn't rise above -10 degrees. Had it been in the summer, though, there could have been unprecedented ice melt. And talking of ice, at the next chart we're going to see you, the lines show the fluctuating levels of sea ice here over the last 40 years. Now, last year was the lowest since records began. This year, which we can see with this red line here, looks set to be even lower. We're currently missing an area of sea ice around the size of Argentina, and that's vital habitat for emperor penguins. It's where they breed and feed, and there are fears they could in the future face extinction. Then you have ice shelves. Now, they naturally carve off to form icebergs, nothing unusual about that, like this one, A81, which is the size of Greater London. But that appears to be happening more regularly, and all these are indicators, scientists say, of humans' impact.
These things are important. They are important for Antarctica, which is vulnerable to change, but they are also important globally. And so, yes, they're another sign of just how much we need to change how much we are affecting the planet and reduce how much we affect the planet through fossil fuel burning.
So what could this mean away from the South Pole? Well, Antarctica accounts for 90% of the world's ice and 70% of the world's fresh water. In some places, get this, the ice is 4 kilometres thick. So any unnatural melting can lead to change in ocean currents, rising sea levels, and in the UK, an increased risk of coastal erosion, flooding, and storm surges. Finally, as Tom was alluding to at the very beginning, Antarctica is white. It sounds simple, but it reflects the heat away. The more that melts, the less rays are reflected and the warmer the planet becomes. Essentially, as you said, turning Antarctica from a refrigerator into a radiator, making it much harder for us to keep a lid on climate change.
Well, Martin, all this on the day that it's been confirmed that July was the hottest ever month since records began. Connected or coincidence?
really tricky, Tom, with any singular event to say these things are connected, because there are fluctuations naturally within the weather. But what's important to note is that all global weather is connected. So those fires we saw in Sam's report were made more likely as a result of the heat wave we saw in southern Europe. That heat wave is the reason we've had such a wet and miserable summer here in the UK. The key thing to take away from this, though, is trends, because what we're starting to see is the trends we're physically observing now back up the scientific predictive models of where they see climate change going. And that picture is a pretty bleak one, I'm afraid.
OK, Martin, thank you very much indeed.